Good evening to everyone who's joining us. This week's quiz is not going to be about vocabulary and definitions. I'm going to test your knowledge on language devices and what I mean by that. And you'll see why, because over the next few weeks, we're going to continue what we were doing, looking at how to analyze fiction. We've looked at characters recently. We've looked at making inferences, and now I'm going to start looking at how to analyze language. So I'm going to give you a quick test to see what you know. You might find some of these difficult. Some of these words might be words that you've never heard before, but I just want to test you to see where you are. So give you a couple more minutes to join. Again, I just want to reiterate, it's fine if you don't know all of these, because I anticipate that some of these may be words that you've never heard before, but we are going to cover them over the next few weeks. I'm going to introduce you to some new terminology. Okay, another minute. Whoever wants to join can join. I know some people are just joining the webinar now. If you've just joined, good evening. I hope you're all okay. The link to the Zoom is to the Hoot is here if you want to play. You can also join midway through the quiz if you don't get time now, or you can put answers in the chat on the Zoom chat if you can't get access to the Kahoot. I will see your answers and I will read them out as we go. Cool, we've got 10 people. I can see 16 people online. Right. I'll assume those of you who haven't joined don't want to take part, and that's okay as well. Remember, you can join midway through the game. Okay, right. Let's make a start. 3, 2, 1. So these are going to be about language devices this week. So I'm going to give you examples of sentences, and I want you to tell me what language device I've used. The night was a dark velvet curtain. What language device is this? Simile, metaphor, personification, or hyperbole? So this should have been a metaphor. It says the night was a dark velvet curtain. I'm comparing the night to a curtain by saying it is or was something else. Well done to those of you who got that right. Just want to check. Can everyone hear me? Someone said there's a microphone issue. Okay, question number 2. He was as brave as a lion. The game pin is at the bottom. It is 4825191 if you still want to join. So it's down here if you want the game pin, 4825191. Nice. Most people got that right. One person said alliteration, but he was as brave as a lion is a simile. Okay, question number 3. Will all great Neptune's ocean wash this blood clean from my hand? I've highlighted the bit you should be looking at. This is an example from Macbeth. Bit more of a tricky one this time, one you might not have heard of. Ooh, 4 people got this right. It is illusion. For those of you who've never heard of this before, we will cover these in the next few weeks. But illusion is where you refer to something that most people would know. So Neptune is the person or the god that we're referring to in this quote. So that makes it illusion. Okay. In The Catcher in the Rye, Holden Caulfield uses the term phony to describe people he dislikes. This is an example of. Again, one you might not have heard of. Hey, three people said it is a colloquialism. So a colloquialism is basically a slang term. Any sort of slang would be a colloquialism. So phony isn't a formal term. It's very much an informal way of critiquing somebody. So that would be a colloquialism. So anything informal, any sort of informal slang is colloquialism. Okay, it was the best of times. It was the worst of times from A Tale of Two Cities. What would that be? It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. Again, one you may not have heard of. Ooh, most people said assonance. It was anaphora. And again, we'll cover all of these in the next few weeks. But anaphora is basically the repetition within a sentence. So it was the best. It was, or rather, it was the. I should have highlighted in bold, but the repetition of it was the is anaphora. So when you repeat things in a sentence, one person got that right. And the silken, sad, uncertain rustling from the raven. Think about how that's pronounced. The silken, sad, uncertain rustling. The sound I'm making. Oh. It was consonants. Now, these might be words that you might not have come across before. Consonance refers to the sound of sentences. So in this example, silken, sad, uncertain, rustling. I have four times used the sort of S sound. So that would be consonants because the sound is repeated throughout the sentence. But I should have allowed alliteration because S and S, I see them, I see what people have done there. And I should have highlighted what I meant. I should have allowed alliteration. Oh, okay. The body of the coach trembled, swayed, and rocked. And I've highlighted the bit that I want you to look at. Trembled, swayed, and rocked. Think about how many words there are there. Is the rule of three because there's three words all in conjunction next to each other. Trembled, one, swayed, two, rocked, three. Nice. Okay, question 8. In Pride and Prejudice, characters refer to someone being in trade instead of saying they are merchants. This is an example of, again, one you might not have heard of. We see this quite often in Macbeth if you've been coming to those sessions. It is a euphemism. So euphemism is when you say something nicer than it is, or slightly softer than it is. So the example here is really they're merchants. That's the correct term. But if you say they're in trade, it's a softer way of saying that. So it'd be a euphemism. And we find this quite often in other plays like Macbeth. Shakespeare uses euphemisms quite a lot. So for example, in Shakespeare plays, people never really say, I murdered somebody. They tend to say things like, I don't know, he died, instead of I murdered him. So it's a softer way of saying something. I've highlighted again what I want you to look at. So Sammy the slippery snake came sliding. highlighted the S's in bold. It is alliteration because of the repeated S's. Okay. The lonely man sat in the corner, his eyes filled with sorrow. Again, I've highlighted in bold the bits to look at. Nice, almost a clean sweep. And it is emotive language. I was so hungry I could eat a horse. It is hyperbole, or otherwise known as exaggeration. So for those of you who don't know, hyperbole is just the proper correct term for exaggeration. The golden yellow of the leaves in the trees. And again, I've highlighted in bold what I want you to think about. Spelt repetition wrong here. My bad for the typo. It is imagery. A trick to spot imagery is if you can see it in your head, it is probably imagery. So the description here, you probably would have got an image of what the leaves look like, and so I would agree that it is imagery. Okay, 13. The river smacked and splashed against the rocks. Again, I've highlighted in bold the words to look at. It is onomatopoeia. Words that sound like they are. So words that are sounds almost. So smack very much sounds like the word, and splash sounds like the word. The leaves danced in the wind. Nice. Again, almost a clean sweep. It's personification. Leaves can't dance. They're not people, but they've been given human qualities. Okay, blood will have blood. And again, I've highlighted the repetition, a quote from Macbeth. Hey, it is repetition because I've used the word more than once. Oh, we've got a new leader on the leaderboard. Are you a man? Again, a quote from Macbeth. Again, almost a clean sweep. It is a rhetorical question, one that does not require an answer. In the Lord of the Rings, the one ring might symbolize something. What might the ring symbolize if it did symbolize something? and just something we're going to think more about today. Nice. It is Power, if you've seen that film or read the books. Okay. Cabined, cribbed, confined, bound are all words in which semantic field? If you had to pick one, what do they all suggest or sound like they might be part of? What group of words might they be part of? It is entrapment. If you are confined or bound, you're tied up. If you're cabined, you're kept in a sort of a prison cell or a cage, and same with cribbed. So they all are within the sort of group of being isolated or trapped. Oh, okay, 19 out of 23. Harry walked wearily. Think about the things I've highlighted in bold, the sounds, the or sounds. So this one is assonance. Again, another word you might not have heard. We looked at consonants. We saw consonants. That was there are repeated consonant sounds like the S's. Assonance is repeated vowel sounds. So notice I've highlighted the or from A. So walked and wearily are sort of repeated vowel sounds. Okay, two contrasting ideas, such as light versus dark, is an example of. Is juxtaposition, again, almost a clean sweep. Juxtaposition just means two contrasting things or ideas. Okay, almost at the end, three more to go. Deafening silence. What might that be an example of? Can silence be deafening, literally? It is an oxymoron. Oxymorons are very similar to juxtaposition. They're when we have two contrasting words next to each other. So in this case, silence cannot be literally deafening, because deafening means loud, where silence is the opposite of that. Very, very, very quiet. So there are two opposite words next to each other. Okay, two more questions to go. Peter pounded the pavement, pressing past pedestrians. What type of Lexus might this be? And again, this might not be something you've covered before. I've noted that it is a higher level one. I want to see who knows this already. It is plosive. For those of you who know, plosive sounds are your P's, your D's, your P, D, that sort of sound. B's, the ones that are hard hitting. Fricative are your C's, your F's, your T's, and your sibilant are your S's. So plosive, because it's P, Peter, pounded, the pavement, pressing, past pedestrians. You've got very harsh hitting sounds, which is plosive. And then finally, what word means to stay longer than necessary? Think about our vocabulary that we've been through recently. Thought I'd throw one in there for the fun of it. It is to linger. Right, well done to our winner. Let's see who it is. Well done. Right, on to the actual lesson of today. We're going to continue thinking about and analyzing fiction. So we've talked a lot recently about character, picking apart characters, picking apart inferences. And I want to build on that today and think about themes and symbolism. Because over the next few weeks, I'm going to start introducing you to how to analyze language. Hence the introductory quiz today. We're going to cover all of those on most of those terms. So, a theme then. What is a theme? A theme is a big issue that runs throughout the text. They're often ideas or experiences that a lot of people will have faced. So you'll see some examples in a second, but a story can have multiple themes because they're just big ideas. The ideas that reoccur as the book or the text or whatever goes along. They're themes that keep ideas that keep coming up. The thing about themes is that they lie beneath the surface and they take being identified in order to work them out. The easiest way to think about what a theme is they are what a book is really about. So we could say, for example, Romeo and Juliet is a play where two star-crossed lovers fall in love with each other. The theme there is love. Yeah, okay, the plot is they fight against the two families, but what it's really about is the love between two people. That's the theme. So theme is not plot. Plot is what happens in a story, whereas the theme is the big idea or the meaning behind why something has been written. Because more often than not, a writer wants you to learn something when you read their book or their text, and they often deliver their meanings through themes. So when you're reading, think about the big ideas that are connected to the story. Is it a story about love? Is it about family? Is it about forgiveness? All of those are examples of themes. So in text, for example, Harry Potter, yes, it's a book about a boy growing up as a wizard who fights Lord Voldemort, but really the themes, it's about friendship. It's about forming those connections with Ron and Hermione. It's about good versus evil. The plot is him defeating Voldemort, but what it's really about is the good versus evil, the friendship. Of Mice and Men, the themes of that book are like poverty, masculinity, friendship, discrimination, ableism. Macbeth is a play about a man who kills the current king so that he can be king. That's the plot, but what it's really about is ambition. It's about how one man gets overtaken by ambition. It's about deception, appearance versus reality. And then Wuthering Heights. The themes are love, isolation, grief, and nature. Common themes that you might find in books or novels or plays. Different writers might use the same themes. It's common to have themes occur throughout a book. The difference is how those writers talk about the themes. So, examples of common ones include things like love, so Romeo and Juliet. But it doesn't have to be just romantic love, it could be love between family, it could be love between friends. Death is quite a common theme that appears. Does a character die in a play or a book? Does the main character struggle with overcoming grief and loss? Time, stuff like aging, memory could be a key theme. Humans versus nature is one that comes up quite often. Even in Macbeth, the natural order of the world tries to restore itself. Nature goes awry. So you could have things about survival, environmental struggle, natural forces. All of these are ideas that keep reoccurring as the play or the book goes on. Politics, things to do with power. Do characters want power? Do they want to lead? Is justice a thing that occurs in a book? Corruption. Ones I put on the right as well. Heroism is one that comes up. Judgment, if it's a crime story. The circle of life, life and death, suffering, coming of age. All of these things are ideas that pop up throughout a book. So someone's put into the chat, what is allusion? So allusion is when you refer to something that everybody knows. So if I was to say, for example, what does everybody know? We all know the character of Romeo from Romeo and Juliet. If I was to say, my friend is like Romeo, you would know exactly what my friend was like because you know what Romeo, the character, was like. You know that he's ambitious, that he's brave, that he will fight for love. So allusion helps to tell something about characters and plot. Now, in terms of themes, writers don't always directly tell the reader the themes. Readers often have to pick up clues to understand what the themes actually are. And the ways that we can do that are by looking at symbols and motifs. So symbolism is the first of our language devices that we're going to look at today. Symbols are objects or images that represent something beyond themselves. So they have a deeper message attached to them. So, for example, in The Lord of the Ring, the ring symbolizes or represents not just a physical ring, but the idea of temptation, of power, of corruption. It has those ideas attached to that physical object. Whereas a motif is a repeated symbol. So if a symbol reoccurs multiple times throughout a story, we call it a motif. So an example is in The Lord of the Flies, fire appears repeatedly. So fire in itself might represent destruction, chaos, but it reappears multiple times, so we call it a motif. So examples of symbols that you might find in stories. Well, people who like the Hunger Games, the mockingjay is a symbol. It isn't just a physical bird, or it represents ideas more than just the mockingjay itself. It represents rebellion, hope, resistance. Katniss wears it to represent everything that she stands for. In The Lord of the Flies, I put a picture at the top. There's a conch shell that reappears, which represents law and order and civilization. When it's rung, the boys all order themselves and it calms people down. Blood in Macbeth represents not just physical blood, but the idea of guilt, violence, and moral corruption. So all of these things represent ideas beyond just a physical object. So the conch isn't just a conch shell, it's representative of something bigger than that. Same with blood. It isn't just blood, it's representative of something bigger. Motifs are just reoccurring symbols, so symbols that occur multiple times throughout a story. We talked about fire. Another good one is in Hamlet, sickness and disease reoccurs throughout the play. It represents something beyond itself. It's about moral decay, societal decay. In Of Mice and Men, you get repeating symbols of the eye, which doesn't just represent the physical eye, it represents the idea of judgment, morality, observation. So all of these represent things beyond the physical thing, if that makes sense. Okay. So how do we actually spot a symbol in a text then? Well, first look for objects, because symbols are always some sort of object or idea, and they appear to be important or are described in detail. So if something keeps appearing in different ways, it could be a reoccurring symbol. So you need to ask yourself, does this object or image seem to stand for something bigger than itself? Is there a reason the writer has purposefully chosen to mention that thing? Then, in order to work out what that symbol actually represents, think about the context in which it was used. What's happening in the story when this thing appears? That might tell you what it represents. Look for repetition. Does it keep coming up? That would mean it's significant. What does it make you think? What does it make you feel? Emotions or ideas could definitely be linked to a theme. So love is a good example. Does something make you feel love? Does something make you feel hatred? Connecting to bigger ideas, we can relate symbols to themes. So love, power, ambition, or corruption. And the tip I've left at the bottom is think about how that thing makes you feel. Does it remind you of a situation you have faced before yourself? And what did that memory mean to you? What did you associate with that memory? And that might tell you or give you a clue about what this thing represents or the idea that it represents. So symbols relate to wider themes. So to work out what a symbol represents, think about what theme they are trying to convey. Often symbols link to wider messages of the text, so what the reader wants you to learn about. So we've been through symbols. Symbols are objects or images that represent something bigger than themselves. A theme is an idea, is the idea itself. So how do we identify a theme? Well, look for those repeated symbols. Look for the motifs. Do they appear multiple times? Think about what those symbols represent. Ask yourself, what big ideas the writer is trying to highlight? What are they trying to tell you? Beyond just what's happening in the plot, what are they actually trying to get you to learn as a reader by reading their text? And if your idea goes beyond the plot, you've probably found a theme. So many texts have multiple themes in. For example, Romeo and Juliet isn't just about love, it's about the division between two families. So there's multiple themes that come up throughout a thing. Ambition in Macbeth isn't just the only theme. Deception comes up, violence comes up, because you can have multiple ideas that occur throughout the text. There's no fixed list of themes. I can't, unfortunately, I wish I could, but I can't just give you a list because there is no one set defined list fits all. It is very much specific to the text itself. But if you can find textual evidence to support your idea, it's valid. If you can support what you think is a theme with evidence, it's valid. It's correct. A theme is just an idea. And if a text gives you that idea, I think it's valid as a theme. So, clues about themes then include characters, plot, and setting. And I'll show you some examples of these. So you can often work out what a theme might be from the characters. So characters, as we know, change. We looked at characters last week. They have to have an arc. They have to go somewhere. They have to start one way, finish another. So looking at characters, you can look at how they change, grow, or learn. So examples might be the perks of being a wallflower. The main character often finds happiness through friendship. So the theme might be friendship. Plot. Are there any key events that happen? If so, are there multiple key events, and what do they have in common? So, for example, in Frankenstein, creating the creature in the first place leads to disaster. So, that could represent the dangers of pushing human limits because it led to the disaster. We're supposed to learn from that disaster. The reader's supposed to learn not to push the limits of human design. Setting. Think about the time and place that the story is set. Is it specific? Does it reflect something bigger, some universal ideas? So, for example, in The Road Not Taken, a fork in the road represents life choices. It isn't just a physical fork in the road, it's metaphorical. It's you could go one way or you could go another. They would both have different outcomes. So try answering what the story is really about without retelling the plot. Your answer will often be the theme. So like I said with Romeo and Juliet, you could say it's about two people who transcend the conflict between their families. But really, it's about love. So if I told you the plot without telling you the plot, I would have to use the word love. So examples of character themes. For example, Holden Caulfield, for those of you who read The Catcher in the Rye, is a lovely book. I recommend if that's something you really enjoy. It's a coming of age novel, genuinely one of the best books I ever read, so I would recommend it. The whole point of that book is about one boy's struggle to find his own identity, to know who he is. And so you could say the theme there is identity, because that's the idea that reoccurs throughout the novel. Jay Gatsby in The Great Gatsby, he's obsessed with the American dream. He embodies ambition, illusion, tragic longing. So the theme there, the idea that keeps reoccurring, is the American dream. In Pride and Prejudice, you might have themes of love and social class. Elizabeth's character grows to explore themes of prejudice and marriage. So you can look at characters to try and work out what the themes might be, what the writer's trying to tell you. Equally, you could look at plot. So, for example, Romeo and Juliet. Obviously, it's two star-crossed lovers who transcend the war between their families, but it's really about love and fate. Of Mice and Men, it's about two people who work on a ranch who have a big dream and they want to achieve their dreams. So really, it's about their loneliness. It's about their dreams, even though that's not the plot. The Hunger Games, the theme that reoccurs is survival and oppression. Yes, okay, it's about a girl who wins a Hunger Games where she has to fight against other people, but really it's about survival. It's about oppression by the capital. And then finally, we have setting related themes. So, for example, in 1984, the book is about how society tries to control everybody. So, really, the theme, what it's really about, is control and the consequences of totalitarian control. Lord of the Flies, again, it's set on a deserted island. It's about a group of boys who are kind of isolated on an island and have to learn to adult by themselves. So really, it's about savagery. It's about their ability to civilize themselves. That's the theme that reoccurs. Okay. Now I wanted to move on to the questions we're going to have a go at today. I want you to kind of do what we've been doing for the past couple of weeks. We're making it a bit interactive. I want you to type some answers in the chat and have a go thinking about symbolism and themes. So the extract that we're going to use today is of Mice and Men. If anyone has read it, it is on the syllabus. It was a book written in 1937, so quite a long time ago. It's set during the Great Depression of America, so in the 1930s. So if people don't know, this was a time when there were a lot of poor people. There was a crash in the economy of America, and it meant that a lot of people lost all their life savings and lost their jobs and were out of work. And so there was a lot of poor people at the time. So that's really what the book is about. And the novel follows two main characters called George and Lenny, who are two workers with a dream of saving money to buy their own farm. That's what the book is about. And as always, I've left a little quote at the bottom from the book. Maybe everybody in the whole damn world is scared of each other. And I think that really sums up the book in all of its beauty. So, as always, what we have been doing, I've given you some questions. These questions are specific about themes and symbols. So I'm going to read through this extract and I want you to think about what theme, what big idea might the writer Steinbeck be introducing here? Why might it be significant for understanding George and Lenny as characters? And then, is there a symbol, is there an object or something physical that tells you this might be the theme or the big idea? So George's voice became deeper. He repeated his words rhythmically, as though he had said them many times before. Guys like us that work on ranches are the loneliest guys in the world. They got no family. They don't belong no place. They come to a ranch and work up a steak, and then they go into town and blow their steak. And the first time you know they're pounding their tail on some other ranch. They ain't got nothing to look ahead to. Lenny was delighted. That's it. That's it. Now tell how it is with us. So is there anything in here that might tell you what the bigger, wider ideas are beyond what's happening in the plot? What might the writer want us to learn from this? Are there any ideas happening here? Judgment, possibly. Why do you say judgment? If you can back it up, I'm happy for that answer. Think about how they feel. What's happening in the plot here is that they're workers. They work on ranches. They constantly move between different ranches to find work. How might they feel doing that kind of work? They're very poor. He doesn't have a family. Um, Depression. Yes, all good ideas. All kind of getting onto the right idea. Can you sum it up in one word? A theme normally is one word. So if you can sum it up in one word, but you're all on the right lines. They're tired. So yep, they're tired. He doesn't have a family. They're poor. They feel their life is over. All of these are on the right lines. I'm just looking for one word. How they might be feeling bored. And is there any symbol that tells you this might be the theme? Is there any sort of physical thing that represents this idea that you're all coming up with? They're homeless, they're vulnerable. Loneliness, someone said it. Loneliness and isolation is the theme I'm looking for. You're all very much on the right line, so I wanted one word, and the one word that I think is loneliness. You can vary around that. That's the one that I came up with. Is there anything that might hint that they are lonely? Is there any physical object mentioned here that might suggest or represent loneliness as an idea? They have no family. Yes, is right, but I want one single object because I think there is here. I think there's something that has a deeper meaning. They belong to no place. Yes. The one that I went with is the ranch. So I said the theme is loneliness and isolation. I think that's the big idea that's happening here. And the reason is that most ranch workers are transient, meaning that they move from place to place. They have no family, no connections. But why is it important for the characters of George and Lenny? Well, it highlights their friendship, which is clearly very unusual. And it's important as they have someone to care for them, very much contrasting to the loneliness everyone else feels. And I went with the ranch. Um, I'm not going to tell you why, because I want you to have to think. Question 3. What could the ranch represent? Because it's a symbol, meaning it has to represent a bigger idea beyond just being a physical ranch. Like, yes, it's a ranch, it's a house. Yes, it's for living in, but what's the big idea outside the box that it could represent? Someone said family. I like it. Anything else? Poor. Yes, I like it. You're all again on the right lines. I'll give you another 30 seconds to have a think. Hard life. Somebody said hard life. I think hard life is the closest to the answer I would have given. I think it represents hard life, the harsh realities of life. A world without security. They're longing for a ranch. They want somewhere to settle down. A ranch to them represents how hard and difficult this world is. It represents that loneliness, the theme of loneliness. The ranch symbolizes the harsh realities during the Great Depression. It is a place of hard work, loneliness, and social inequality where most men are isolated and transient, moving from job to job with no lasting connections. For George and Lenny, the ranch represents the obstacles and limitations of the real world, in contrast to their dream of owning land. So yeah, very much represents a hard life. I like that. Okay, right. Let's look at this next extract then, from the same section. Whilst I read this, I want you to consider how does Lenny's statement, because I got you to look after me and you to look after and me to look after you, reinforce the theme of friendship. Theme being the big idea here. So Lenny was delighted. That's it. Now tell how it is with us. George went on. With us, it ain't like that. We got a future. We got somebody to talk to that gives a damn about us. We don't have to sit in no bar room blowing our jacks just because we got no place else to go. If them other guys gets in jail, they can rot for all anybody gives a damn, but not us. Then he broke in, but not us. And why? Because I got you to look after me, and you got me to look after you, and that's why. He laughed delightedly. Go on now, George. You got it by heart. You can do it yourself. No, you. I forget some of the things. Tell about how it's gonna be. So here, there's a theme, an idea of friendship. How might it represent friendship? It shows that they are hopeful or both have hopes for each other. Yes, 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 yes. Very much, very, very, very much on the right lines. They're taking care of each other. Yes, love it. I think the answers I'm getting are pretty much right. Trying to say that friends are always, they'll always be by each other's side no matter what the challenges are, and it will also show how close they are together. Similar backgrounds. Yeah, all of you on the right lines. There's an idea that they're very much loyal to each other. So, like somebody said, they'll be by each other's side no matter what. So very much the right answer. They have hopes for each other. All of this coming under the bracket of they support each other. They're loyal to each other. And I think their friendship gives them that sense of security. Like George says here, they're never going to get arrested because they could just look after each other. Other people in their position go about without a job and end up just spending all of their money in bars. But not them. They have each other for comfort. And I think that's the beauty of this theme of friendship. Okay, so as I read through this next one, consider what dream do George and Lenny share? And what theme might this show? I put is, but I meant this. What symbols show this theme? So the theme, let's remind ourselves, is the big idea that reoccurs throughout the story. So is there any sort of big ideas occurring here? Okay, someday we're going to get the Jack together and we're going to have a little house and a couple of acres and a cow and some pigs and live off the fat of the land, Lenny shouted. And have rabbits. Go on, George, tell about what we're going to have in the garden and about the rabbits and the cages and about the rain and the winter and the stove. And how thick the cream is and the milk like you can hardly cut it. Tell about that, George. Why don't you do it yourself? You know all of it. No, you tell it. It ain't the same if I tell it. Go on, George. How I get to tend the rabbits? Well, said George, we'll have a big vegetable patch and a rabbit hutch and chickens. And when it rains in the winter, we'll just say the hell with going to work and we'll build up a fire in the stove and set around it and listen to the rain coming down on the roof. Nuts, he took out his pocket knife. I ain't got no time for no more. He drove his knife through the top of one of the bean cans, sawed out the top, and passed the can to Lenny. Then he opened a second can. From his side pocket, he brought out two spoons and passed one of them to Lenny. So what dream did they share? What is their dream? They want to live together? Yes. What specifically? They say they're going to have a little house. It's going to have a few acres, a cow, pigs. They're going to have rabbits. They're going to have a vegetable patch. They're going to have a house with a roof on with the rain hitting it. A farm, yeah, very much a farm. They want a farm together. To be rich and live happily on a farm, to live together. Yeah, all of these are right. What symbols, what physical things show you this dream? What dream, sorry, what theme does this represent, this dream represent? How does this dream make you feel? Like if you were them and you had nothing, you were very poor, but your dream was to own land and own a farm and own animals. How would you feel having that dream? Even in real life, you all have dreams, you all have things that you want. How do having those dreams make you feel? Why do people dream? Someone put it on the nail on the head. Hope, hope, passion, wonderful. The idea here is yes, they have a dream, that's the plot, but the theme is this idea of hope, this aspiration that they have in this really harsh world that they're in. You probably all have dreams. You probably have things that you want to achieve out of your life. Thinking about those things should give you a sense of hope, should give you purpose and longing. What symbol shows or gives you an idea of hope? I think there's multiple you could pick out here, but what physical objects or things show the theme of hope and aspiration? In the text. What physical objects in this text evoke a sense of hope? The farm animals is a great answer. Yeah, the farm animals is one. Any other physical object that makes you feel hope and aspiration? Farm animals is one. Food is one, stuff like the vegetable patch, definitely. The rabbits, the chickens, all of these things. I said rabbits, the rain, the stove, the vegetable patch, etc. All of these things should convey the theme of hope and aspiration. Their dream is to own land, a house, animals, and live independently. This represents hope and aspiration, something to look forward to in a harsh world. It's their motivation and comfort. Okay, the last questions then, before we finish for today. Same extract. What might the house symbolize? What might it represent? What might the rabbits symbolize? What might the rain and the stove symbolize? So I'm looking for ideas here. Yes, a house is something you live in and it's got a roof over your head, but what might it represent to you? What does it mean to these characters? They have nothing in their life. It should mean something to them. Someone said shelter. Yes. A cozy home filled with support. Support is a lovely word for this. A safe place. Yes. Something with security, freedom, comfort, warmth, protection, safety and stability. All absolutely correct. The thing that I was looking for was something along the lines of security, stability, safety, which loads of you have put in. So well done. What about the rabbits? What might they mean to Lenny and George? Why does Lenny really, really want the rabbits? What might they represent to him? Again, think about they have nothing. They're really poor. They're basically living job to job. What might the rabbits represent to Lenny? What might it mean for them to have these rabbits? Somebody said their love of animals. Yep. Peace. Yep. Also think about what the stove and the rain might symbolize. Why did the writer specifically mention the rain coming down on the roof? It says, listen to the rain coming down on the roof. Why, what might that represent to them? So it said warmth, family, something they care for. Yep. Think more out of the box. Think big ideas, things that aren't directly said in the text. I'll give you 30 more seconds and then I'll show you go through what I said. Maybe pride. So their dream came true and they're living their dreams. Yeah. They have a shelter to protect them from bad weather. So what I said, the house, like everybody, multiple people said security, freedom, stability, safety. You all said that. So well done. In terms of the rabbits, I said that it might symbolize innocence. Someone said comfort, reward. For Lenny, they represent a simple, tangible part of the dream, showing what he values the most and why he's motivated to work towards it. They mean so much to him, more than they would to most people, showing how much he desires to get this dream. And then in terms of the rain and the stove, somebody said peace, absolutely. Somebody was right. Peace and contentment. Think about how you feel. I mean, I love that feeling. You know, when you're in bed at night and you have the rain against the window, you feel quite comforted. You feel quite peaceful and calm. So I think that's what it symbolizes, the peace, the contentment, the simple pleasures in life. Okay, right. For this week's homework then, again, thank you to everyone who's been sending me stuff. I have started to get a few things sent back. So I've marked a few things this week. So if you've been sent it, let me know just to make sure you've got it. If not, I will make sure I get sent back to you. But thank you to the people who've been sending me in stuff. Now, for this week's homework, I'm going to give you some more of these theme and symbol questions, just to kind of get you thinking. So the extract I'm going to give you is just after the one we just read. It's just before the one that we've read. The extract for homework is just from the opening of the book, before we meet the characters. Steinbeck, the writer, begins by describing the natural world around the Salinas River in California, where the story is set. The place is important because the novel begins and ends here. It's a peaceful at the start, but by the end it becomes the setting of tragedy. The two characters, George and Letty, come down here often. So I've given you that bit of context so you understand the extract. So for those of you who want to do the homework, as always, take a picture. Otherwise, this session is recorded, so you can go back and get it if you want. I'll give you 30 seconds if you want to take it. Someone said, like the roof is shielding from their dreams. It is. That's actually quite a good way of thinking about it. That the roof is kind of, yeah, shielding them from their dreams. I hadn't thought of it that way, but that's quite an interesting way of thinking. It reminds them of how grateful they are. Okay. And then if you want the questions, here they are. And as always, you're welcome to stay for the Key Stage 4 session as well. Okay. This session is recorded if you want to do the homework. But otherwise, have a lovely evening, have a nice week. Stay for Macbeth if you want to. Right. For those of you just coming in from Macbeth, good evening, welcome. I'm just going to leave it a couple more minutes just so everyone gets a chance to come in and we can start on time and people won't miss anything. So I'll give a couple minutes just to let people enter. Okay, right. Um, Someone said, if I wasn't here for the early Macbeth, can I join? Absolutely. I mean, this will be the last session, but you're very much welcome to join if you find this helpful. What we have been doing is going through the character of Macbeth in chronological order, and I'm about to do Act 5. So welcome to those of you who are here for Macbeth. And glad to know we've reached the end of Macbeth. With a caveat, I will admit early doors that I haven't finished the last scene. I haven't had time. I'm sorry. So we will be doing up to scene 7, and I will start the next session by doing 5-10 minutes of Act 5, Scene 8. But we will move on to Inspector Cole's next session. But I'll just start it off by finishing Macbeth. I just haven't had time, so I do apologize. But yeah, let's have our last full session of Macbeth. Starting with Act 5, Scene 1. Now, Macbeth as a character is not actually in this scene, but I've mentioned it anyway because I think he's still relevant to this scene. And in this scene, Lady Macbeth reappears in her final scene, sleepwalking and tormented by guilt. She obsessively rubs her hands, saying, "Out, damn spot, out, I say," which is a contrast to her earlier confidence. Is a little picture. And the reason I've included this is because, for those of you who don't know, biologically, dreaming is what the brain does to process subconscious thoughts. So those such as fear, shame, guilt. So the fact that Lady Macbeth sleepwalks should tell us how guilty she feels. It's all of her subconscious thoughts coming out. Her being very overwhelmed, the fact that she's sleepwalking. And the reason I've included this, even though Macbeth isn't actually in this scene, is because all of these quotes, all of the things that she says while she's sleepwalking, signify some form of reversal of roles. So, for example, she says, "Out, dumb spot, out, I say. The smell of the blood, still all the perfumes of Arabia will not sweeten this little hand. The Thane of Fife had a wife, where is she now? Will these hands never come clean? What's done cannot be undone." I've included this because think back to Act 2. Macbeth said all of these similar things. But now it's interesting because there's been a structural change. It's now Lady Macbeth who's saying all of these things. So the guilt has very much switched hands. It was Macbeth who was really guilty. Now it's Lady Macbeth. And I think her hyperbolic and sort of rhetoric language mirrors Macbeth's in Act 2 when he killed Duncan. And you also get this reoccurring motif of the blood as well, the smell of blood, as a symbol of guilt. So she's fallen into this pit of despair, lost all sense of purpose. So like Macbeth, she hallucinates, but in the form of dreaming. And she speaks to objects, exaggerates and alludes. So I thought it was interesting to include this because of that role reversal, even though Macbeth isn't specifically in this. And the doctor says she needs more the divine than the physician, which I think is really interesting because what he's saying there is she can't be cured by medicine. She can only be cured by seeking God's forgiveness, which tells us that her illness is of the mind, is spiritual, not physical. And we know this because you get the kind of juxtaposition there between the divine and the physician. This contrast between physical medicine and spiritual healing. And so this juxtaposition emphasizes that her ailment is not just physical, but moral and spiritual. Her guilt cannot be cured by medicine, but by divine intervention. This also highlights the limits of human power. Even the best doctor cannot heal a soul corrupted by sin. Similarly, you get the sort of metaphoric language as well, that she is psychologically tormented. And even though the disease is in her mind, it's being presented as a bodily physical illness. She's diseased in the soul, not the body. And then you get again this allusion to God. But I don't want to spend too much time on Lady Macbeth. I want to get us finished on Macbeth. One thing I did want to say was contextually, this is an interesting quote. Because like Macbeth, she never asks for forgiveness. But contextually, Christianity, or Christians at the time, believed that forgiveness from God requires you to repent and requires to say that you're sorry. But the doctor's quote reflects this belief. But her tragedy is that she's spiritually lost. I mean, she's sleepwalking, for God's sake. So she needs forgiveness, but she can't reach it. So much so that all of her insecurities, all of her guilt is coming out repressed in her dreams. So the audience would understand that her only hope would be confession, basically seeking God and praying by divine grace, none of which she does. So she is, like Macbeth, condemned to hell. But I don't want to focus too much on Lady Macbeth today. So, Act 5, Scene 2 then. In this scene, the armed troops begin to march towards Dunsinane to confront Macbeth in his castle. The structure of this scene is we're very much at the climax of the play. All the suspense, all the tension is coming out. I also have to apologize because I've not done any of the transitions in this today. So you can get a lot of text, unfortunately. But again, I'm so sorry, I've just not had much time. So the English power is near, led on by Malcolm, his uncle Seward, and the good Macduff. Revenges burn in them for their dear causes, would to the bleeding and the grim alarm excite the mortified men. What Macduff means by this, sorry, not Macduff, what the soldier means by this is that the English army is approaching, led by Malcolm and his uncle Seward, and the good Macduff. The desire for revenge burns in them. They want revenge. Their reasons for wanting revenge would cause even dead men to rise from their graves and rush to help them in battle. And I wanted to highlight that because this quote really summarizes the tension that this scene is producing as they march towards the castle. I mean, you get the sort of metaphor there of the burning revenge, as if it was a flame, as if it was fire, which kind of symbolizes their passion and their anger towards Macbeth, how motivated they are and how righteous they feel. Again, the imagery of fire sort of implies that they are, I don't know, purging Macbeth's infected rule. Think about in biology, when you want to sterilize a surface or sterilize something, you put it in a flame. So they're basically saying here that they feel like they can purge Macbeth as if he's some sort of bacteria. They want to get rid of him, and their revenge is like a flame. It burns enough to do that. So the visual and auditory, very gory imagery of the bleeding and the grim alert evokes the horrors of war, but is juxtaposed with the emotive language and the adjective of dear, which reinforces their righteousness of their mission. They are fighting for order, family, honor, and country, which elevates their cause to something noble and heartfelt, which very much contrasts to Macbeth's selfish ambitions. So the reason I wanted to highlight that was purely based on the tension of that it creates. Now, Macduff says, Great Dunsinane, he strongly fortifies. Some say he's mad, others that lesser hate him do call it valiant fury. And what he's saying there is the castle is being defended. So Macbeth and his army are defending the castle. Some people think he's a mad tyrant. Some people think he's evil. Other people who are on his side actually think he's quite brave and he's in the right. So what he's saying here is Macbeth is securing his castle. He's preparing for battle. Yet even in his tragic downfall, it's interesting here that people are divided. It's as some say he's mad, others call it valiant fury. So Shakespeare's made a point of highlighting the difference in views that people have about Macbeth. You know, some people think he's insane, some people think he's noble. So there's clearly tension and suspense held there, because some people see him as a tragic hero, some people think he's a mad tyrant. But what I wanted to highlight was this euphemism here of the valiant fury. It almost softens the truth. Because really, we know the truth. He's insane. He's killed people for no reason. But they call it valiant fury, as if he's almost heroic and courageous. And so that kind of reflects the state of the audience. We do have a little bit of sympathy for him, but we mostly dislike him as a character because he represents the product of us as the audience giving into our innate desires, if that makes sense. So, the fact that people have different views about him kind of reflects how we as the audience feel. We partly dislike him, we partly feel sympathy for him. Either way, he still reflects the part of us that wants to give in to our urges and give in to our desires. And I really wish I'd done the transitions because it looks very messy. So I do apologize for that. I'm going to come out to and move this up. I wasn't supposed to have left this as messy, so I do apologize. So those he commands move only in command, nothing in love. Now does he feel his title hanging loose about him, like a giant's robe upon a dwarfish thief. What this quote really means is that the soldiers he commands are just following orders. They don't actually like him. They don't actually agree with him. They're just doing it because he tells them to do it. And so it kind of presents his rulership as being one of fear, not love. I don't know if you've heard that phrase before. Rule with love, not fear. Whereas Macbeth is very much doing the opposite. He's ruling by fear. People are just following his orders blindly because they're scared of him. But what I wanted to highlight was the interesting use of words. You get this repetition here of the commands. Those he commands only move in command. Basically saying, those who follow him do so because they're told to do so. And so it emphasizes how hollow his rule actually is. They follow him because they have to, not because they actually want to. And so it reflects the player's moral message because you can't force love and success. People, not everyone in the world is going to like you. You can't force people to like you. And so that kind of highlights the tragedy of this play. You also get the juxtaposition here. So only in command, nothing in love. So the contrast between command and love highlights Macbeth's isolation because his leadership inspires fear rather than affection. People are just scared of him. They don't actually like him. And so it reflects how his tyranny destroys human connection. But what I think is most interesting is this sort of simile down here. Now does he feel his title hang loose about him, like a giant's robe upon a dwarfish fief? What they're saying here is they're comparing his rulership as king to being like a cloak that hangs on him, but it's too big for him. Imagine like when you were little, I don't know if you ever did this when you were like 5, you tried on your parents' clothing. It's kind of like that. They're kind of comparing him to a kid who's trying on the parents' clothing. They're saying like he tries to be king, but he's not meant to be king. And we know that he's not meant to be king because his clothes don't fit. He doesn't fit the part of being king. So the metaphor here of the clothing hanging loose presents his role as a piece of clothing that does not fit. This suggests that he's unsuitable to rule as king. And the idea of hanging as well almost presents this idea of heaviness. Like he can't handle being king because it's just such a big role that's not meant for him. He's so burdened with it. And that's kind of extended by this metaphor, which compares him to a dwarf wearing a giant's robe. It's almost quite a grotesque image because it paints like him as a tiny man swallowed by this huge robe, which highlights quite a visual piece of imagery, I would argue, which contrasts morally to his actions previously. So the robe almost symbolizes the divine rule. It's him as king. The robe is supposed to represent what being a king should be. But Macbeth's too small to live up to that. He's too small to fit into this robe. He doesn't belong as king. So it shows us how he broke the great chain of being to be king. He cannot wear his stolen power naturally because it does not belong to him. Remember, he killed Duncan, he killed the previous king. So he's not supposed to be king, but he's trying to fit into a position that is not his. And then a bit of context to the AO3, thinking about how this fits into the wider context of the play. He is experiencing the breakdown of the Great Chain. He was a tragic hero. He's overstepped his place on this earth. By killing Duncan, by killing Banquo, he's overstepped his place by forcing him into a position of being king. And so we can link that to the divine right of kings and the great chain of being. He can never truly be king as it is not his natural God-given position. He very much stole it from Duncan. So this is his tragic downfall as a tragic hero. He's flawed by ambition, and his ambition has caused him to cause all of this suffering on Earth. He will never be able to live up to the greatness of previous kings. And it kind of links back to in the previous act when we met King Edward, who had healing powers, whereas Macbeth clearly does not have healing powers. So it's almost, yeah, saying that he's not right for this role because he broke the great chain of being. And that's a consequence. Okay, now the next few quotes highlight a common theme. Theme being illness and sickness. This idea that sort of reoccurs throughout the next quotes. And it's a really interesting one because we kind of came across this theme back in Act 4. I mean, even before Act 4, in Act 3, the world, if you remember back, starts to act like it's a sick person. Like horses start to eat one another. The weather is terrible. And so we get this idea of illness and sickness. So Caithness is just a soldier. He says, meet we the medicine of the sickly wheel. And what he means by that, and again, I apologize for the mess. Let me move this. He says, we shall go meet Malcolm, who is the medicine that will cure this sick country. So what he's saying here is he's comparing Malcolm, who's meant to be king, to medicine. He's saying that Malcolm is medicine, and if we give it to this country, everything will be fine. If we restore him as king, everything will go back to how it's supposed to be, and the world will restore itself, happiness will reign, everything's dandy. And so you get this sort of metaphor of of him as medicine, almost presenting him as a cure to Macbeth's tyrannous evil, as if he's going to save all of Scotland. Malcolm symbolizes the restoration of the natural order, the righteousness, because he's meant to be king. You know, he has connotations of divine intervention, which ties into the themes of rightful kingship and spiritual healing under correct rulership. So if we link that to the divine right of kings, when the right person is king, they're saying that the world will be in balance. Whereas Macbeth is not the right person because he stole the position. He broke the great chain of being by killing Duncan. So they're saying that we need to restore Malcolm as king because that's how we restore the earth. And so you get this kind of recurring imagery of the earth being presented as sick. It's like a sick patient. It's being personified as a sick patient. This presents it as something that has been corrupt but can be healed, highlighting themes of corruption and divine intervention. So again, the earth is personified as a sick person, makes the suffering of the Scottish people seem more vivid to highlight the impact of Macbeth's sins. And then yet again, we get this juxtaposition, the contrast between medicine and illness, the medicine and sick, between decay and restoration, illness and healing. This gives the audience a sense of hope that Macbeth's destructive, tyrannous reign is going to come to an end. So thinking specifically about context for a little bit, for our 6 marks of context, we can apply this first to the natural order, so the great chain of being. The idea that people believe that Malcolm is going to restore order, we can link to the great chain of being because the audience are given this sense of hope, almost as if Malcolm represents the restoration of the natural order. You know, he's the one that's going to fix the break in the great chain of being. You know, he is the rightful king. He's the one that's supposed to be king. And so he's coming to reclaim his throne as God's selected servant. So by obeying the divine right of kings, by putting him back where he should be, it's going to heal the world and bring peace to Scotland. And so the effect of the audience is that it's going to be a warning to them not to sin. They're going to learn to avoid sinful behaviors because otherwise the consequence is worldly disorder. Now, we can also link to the context that Macbeth is a tragic hero. It might be easy to say that he's an evil tyrant. You know, we've seen him kill multiple people. But really, he is a tragic hero. And I want you all to remember that because the whole point, the whole genre of this play is tragedy. Macbeth is a tragic hero. He's someone that started high and fell from a place of grace. He's not a villain at all. He's someone that has felt guilt. He's someone that has felt deeper emotion. And we know he's a tragic hero because the consequences of his actions are demonstrated here. He's made the earth sick by killing Duncan, by killing Banquo. His sinful acts of murder and deception have led the earth to become ill, but has caused great suffering to the people of Scotland. Yet he was corrupted by his own fatal flaw of ambition and fell from grace. However, he is still human, and the audience know this. He's a human that's just given into his desires. His actions serve as a warning to the audience, who do still sympathize with him because he is human. He's not evil. He's not an evil tyrant. He is a tragic hero, someone who just gave in to his desires. As they see, the audience have their own sinful thoughts. We've probably all had thoughts that, we wish we hadn't had before. So we recognize that Macbeth is not just an evil person who does bad deeds for the sake of it. He's corrupt. He gave in to his desires. And so the audience know this and sympathize with him. And therefore, his actions kind of act as a moral message. Okay. That was Act 2, Act 5, Scene 2, where they march towards the castle. Macbeth is not actually in Act 5, Scene 2, but it's still interesting because it's about him. Now, Act 5, Scene 3. Macbeth appears as the English army approaches. He dismisses the reports of an approaching army, relying on the witch's prophecy that no man born of woman shall harm him. He orders his armor to be brought to him, preparing for battle. And I've put a little picture of what his armor would have looked like historically, so you get a good idea of, I don't know, visuals, I guess. Now, again, I can only apologize for not finishing marking this up. But Macbeth says to the doctor, "Canst thou not minister to a diseased mind?" And the doctor replies by saying, "Therein the patient must minister to himself." Now, what's happened here is, remember in Act 5, Scene 1, Lady Macbeth was sleepwalking. The doctor said that she was mentally ill. So this is his response to that situation. So he says to the doctor, "Can't we heal Lady Macbeth's diseased mind?" And the doctor says, "Well, in order to do that, she's kind of got to heal herself. There's no medicine that I can give her to help her. She's got to seek God in order to heal." So we kind of get this this sort of medical metaphor, the idea of minister for fixing a diseased mind. It presents Lady Macbeth's psychological torment as sort of a physical illness, extending the metaphor of illness that we had in Act 4. And the previous scene, I should add. Just as Scotland is sick under Macbeth's rule, Lady Macbeth is also sick under the weight of her conscience. So it shows the consequence of breaking the great chain of being. Therefore, the audience would know and be warned not to break the great chain of being, because if they did, it would cause the earth to become sick, and it would cause them to fall into a torment like Lady Macbeth has. You also get the sort of rhetorical question, "Canst thou not minister to a diseased mind?" ? The question is rhetorical, even though the doctor answers, and the reason is because the answer is implied. The doctor didn't need to respond. The answer, he could have said nothing and the answer would have been the same. It's implied that the doctor cannot cure this disease because the disease is not a physical disease, it's guilt, a madness. And so it highlights Macbeth's depression as he seeks to control the uncontrollable, the desperation, not depression, sorry. You also get the sort of medical imagery as well, the idea of minister, and canst thou minister to a diseased mind? It emphasizes the limits of human medicine. The physical ailments can be treated, but our spiritual and moral ailments cannot. Lady Macbeth needs God in order to be healed. She can't just be given medicine because it's guilt that she feels. But there's also some irony here, because he asks the doctor, "Can't you heal her diseased mind?" But the irony is that he's diseased as well. I mean, think back to the guilt that he felt in Act 2 and Act 3. The irony is that he also is kind of diseased. I mean, he's committed all these horrible things. So he craves a cure for Lady Macbeth's guilt, yet he's the one who has a very much greater disease. He looks outward for the remedy rather than acknowledging his own moral decay. He never asked for forgiveness. And so I think that's interesting irony there. Okay. Then the doctor responds, therein the patient must minister to himself. Like he said, for that kind of relief, the patient must heal herself. The doctor's line very sharply contrasts and juxtaposed to Macbeth's previous question. He wants a physical medicine, a cure for her illness, suggesting that she needs inner spiritual healing. She can't be healed by medicine. And so it kind of emphasizes the scale of both of their tyranny. The fact that Lady Macbeth egged him on to kill Duncan. She encouraged him to kill people. And he was the one that actually killed them. You also get this idea, like the double entendre. I don't know if anyone noticed it, but he says the patient must minister to himself. Now, on one hand, minister could mean give medicine. On another hand, it could be minister like a church minister, a priest. And so Shakespeare's very clever in his use of language because this double entendre shows that Shakespeare can blur meanings. It could be to treat a disease or it could refer to a priest. So this kind of extends the metaphor of sickness and spiritual corruption. It shows that wounds that are self-inflicted can only be healed by yourself. She needs God. Her diseases of the mind, it's a moral corruption. She can't just be given medicine. She needs to repent. And so it's a very interesting double entendre there. You also get this sort of like contextual link to religion. Christian belief states that all sin, even murder, can be forgiven if someone repents for salvation. But it's interesting because neither Macbeth nor Lady Macbeth do that. They never ask for forgiveness. So therefore, by the laws of Christianity, both of them are irredeemable and are suffering the consequences of their sins. So it not only confirms Macbeth's peripeteia from Act 3, but it marks Lady Macbeth as also being damned. He is a tragic hero, destined for eternal damnation. He must fall, so should she. They're both suffering the consequences of breaking the great chain. And therefore, cosmic balance can only be restored if they both die. And that's the harsh truth of it. Okay. Now, when the doctor tells him that there's nothing he can do, he says to Macbeth, I can't give her medicine. She has to seek God to be forgiven. This is his response. He says, throw sidekick to the dogs. And what he means to this is medicine is for dogs, which I think is quite a childish response to the situation because he responds very sarcastically. He responds very bitterly in tone. He's very despairing in the way that he speaks. It's as if he's lost all sort of sense of healing. He no longer believes that he can be saved. His sense of hopelessness comes through. Like he's a stropping child, basically being like, okay, I can't get what I want, so yeah, cool, go away, everyone. He's like a stropping child, and it's kind of funny. He also has very hyperbolic language. He kind of exaggerates quite a lot. Like he throw psychic, throw the medicine to the dogs. He could just say, like, okay, well, it doesn't matter. But he goes, no, we're going to throw medicine to the dogs. So he like exaggerates to almost underline how frustrated he feels, how nihilistic he feels. And when I say nihilistic, it's a word that I'm going to keep using, is feeling that life is meaningless. And he often feels that life is meaningless. So by using that hyperbole, by throwing the medicine to the dogs, he's saying that if nothing matters, then neither do his crimes. He's saying that, okay, if I can't cure Lady Macbeth, if there is no physical cure, if there is nothing we can do, then life doesn't matter. Therefore, me committing more crimes doesn't matter. And so I'm going to keep committing crimes because clearly there is no God, clearly there is no salvation, clearly there is no justice. And so he stops like a child and he starts saying, well, okay, well, I'm going to commit more crimes then. We also kind of get this noun of the dogs as well, that symbolizes almost the worthlessness and savagery that he reduces medicine to. Basically emphasizing that he rejects that idea of redemption. He's like, well, cool, I can't be forgiven. Lady Macbeth can't be forgiven. I can't be forgiven. Well, cool, there's no God. Well, I'm just going to do more crimes. is basically what he's saying here. And that contrasts quite heavily to Malcolm's view on medicine that we just saw in the past scene. Malcolm in the past scene said that, Macduff is the medicine that will cure the country. And that very much heavily contrasts to what Macbeth is saying here. He's saying, well, throw the medicine away. It's pointless. It's useless. Nothing can cure this earth. And so it shows how Macbeth very much is blind because he is the cause of the suffering. He is the cause of the destruction. But he never acknowledges that at all. Okay. So contextually then, this very much again shows that he's a tragic hero and not an evil villain. And we know that because he is kind of self-aware of his own flaws, fate, and emotions. The fact that he knows or feels that life is meaningless, that everything he does is meaningless, shows that he is human. He has human emotions, and therefore we do sympathize with him a little bit. He feels like life is meaningless. Him saying, throw the medicine to the dogs, is his way of saying, I acknowledge that life is meaningless. I acknowledge that everything I've done up until this point has had no purpose, it's had no meaning. And so I might as well commit more crimes. It's kind of what he's saying here. He feels like life is meaningless because he knows he's gone too far to seek religious salvation. But he is still a person who fell from grace. He began really high at the beginning and just gave in to his ambitions. And then he responds also by saying, examine my country's urine. He tells the doctor to examine the country's urine. And that's I think it's quite a funny phrase, really. Because on a physical level, it's like a doctor's examination. A doctor can take urine and examine it and tell you what's wrong. It's kind of what he's asking here. He's telling the doctor to basically tell him what's wrong with the world. And that's ironic because he is what's wrong with the world. He's caused it. He killed Duncan. He killed Banquo. He took the position of king that he was not his. And so it's ironic because he doesn't actually understand what is wrong with the world. He knows that everything is meaningless, and he knows that his actions are futile, but he doesn't acknowledge why that is. And it's ironic because he's aware enough to realize that the world is corrupt, but he can't acknowledge that it's his fault. And so the world has been torn apart by him. People are suffering because of him. And that's just interesting that he never really acknowledges that. He never says, oh, it is my fault that I was in the wrong. But he is still human. He's flawed but full of emotion. Therefore, he is a tragic hero and not an evil villain. Because he has that understanding. He has that self-awareness. He just can't quite understand that it's his fault. He's still blind to that fact. He's so driven by ambition that he's blind to logical thinking and reason. He feels helpless, but doesn't understand why. And that's the fact that he feels helpless at all shows us he's not evil. He's not an evil villain because he has human emotion that we as an audience can sympathize with. Okay. He then finishes, pardon me, goes to the end of that scene 3 and says, bring me no more reports. Let them fly all till Birnam Wood remove the Dunsinane name. I cannot taint with fear. What's the boy Malcolm? Was he not born of woman? I will not be afraid of death and destruction until Birnam Forest comes to Dunsinane. So I hope what you've noticed is he's kind of regurgitating what the witches told him in Act 4. He said that he's not going to be scared until the forests move. He's not going to be scared because Malcolm was born of a woman. So he's kind of regurgitating the things the witches told him, and which kind of solidifies how confident he feels. His language here is defiant. There's a lot of imperatives. Bring me, let them. But yeah, there's a lot of imperatives in defiant language. His tone is almost mocking here. He's speaking to his servant when he says this, by the way. And the fact that he has quite a mocking tone, he speaks down to his servant, almost emphasizes how overconfident and how falsely secure he feels. He feels very much dependent on the witch's prophecies. And this quote reflects his hubris, his excessive pride, which foreshadows his downfall, because the audience know that Macduff was not born of a woman. Macduff was born by C-section, which means that he was cut out of his mum. So the dramatic irony tells us, the audience, that we know he's going to die. We know he's going to fall. So no matter how hard he tries, he cannot escape fate. He uses free will to do evil, but ultimately it is that fate that restores order, which is a really interesting concept. So what this quote shows is how confident he is. He's purely relying on a witch's prophecies. He's saying, well, the witches told me that that I was only going to die when the woods moved, which is never going to happen because trees can't move. They also told me that I can't die by anybody who was born from a woman. Well, everyone was born from a woman. And so his overconfidence and his inability to look past the logical leads to his downfall. He cannot escape fate. Okay, and then finally, he ends Act 5, Scene 3 by saying, I am sick at heart. I have lived long enough. My way of life has fallen into the seer, the yellow leaf. And I wanted to highlight this quote because it's the first time that we kind of see him feeling bad for himself. He acknowledges that he's sick at heart. He uses that metaphor of sickness again, of illness. He's framing his own despair, his own sadness, his own self-pity as being an illness, a physical illness that shows how his inner corruption has led to physical decline. It signals how spiritually exhausted he is and how that translates to him feeling physically weak. You also kind of get this fricative consonance, the sick at heart, as well, to emphasize the pain he feels. Now, what he's saying here is the path of my life now leads me towards withering and death, like the yellowing leaf. It's the first time that he acknowledges that he's probably going to die. He knows he's going to die, and he's starting to feel bad for himself. So this whole scene, the reason this scene is in there, is because it's the first time that we see this turning point, that he is getting to a point where he feels like everything is meaningless. He's nihilistic and he knows he's going to die. And so we're seeing him now kind of walk towards his own death. He says, I have lived long enough. There's such a tone of resignation there. He's given up. And that very much contrasts to his earlier hubris. You know, think back to Act 1, where he was so driven by ambition. Whereas now, he's weary, he's sad, he's self-pitying. He recognizes that he's going to die and that everything he does is worthless and futile. So it almost makes his suffering seem very bleak in the way that it's presented. And he uses the sort of metaphor and the imagery of nature, the cycle of life and death, to emphasize this. You know, he uses naturalistic imagery. He refers to the natural cycle of life and death, the yellow leaf. He refers to the fact that all leaves turn from green to yellow, and yellow kind of means that they're dying. So the adjective seer means fried or withered, which symbolizes his corrupted soul as a consequence of his sins. Much like the yellow leaf, he feels close to death and recognizes that he is going to die, that it's inevitable. And so in this quote, he's reflecting on his time as king and realizing how sinful his actions have been and how they've amounted to pretty much nothing. So he's feeling very worthless. And so the context, again, and I really want to hammer this home, he is a tragic hero, and we know this now. He's becoming aware of his own downfall. Much like the yellow leaf, he knows his time is almost up, and this extended metaphor of sickness ties him to the corrupted state of the earth. Like the earth, he is also diseased, showing that he is the cause of suffering. Like the yellow leaf, he has started decaying due to the consequences of his own immoral acts. He broke the great chain, now nature is fighting back. So it's really interesting that Shakespeare chose to use this naturalistic imagery because it very much ties him to the state of the earth. Like we've just seen in previous quotes, the earth is presented as a sick patient, it's personified as having an illness. So this sort of him saying that I am like the earth, I'm dying like the earth, shows that he understands his own downfall. He understands how nature is almost fighting back. Okay, and then he says, I'll fight till from my bones my flesh be hacked. And I really wanted to highlight this because it's a very gory piece of thing that he says. I'll fight till from my bones my flesh be hacked. Like he could have just said, I'll fight to the end. But he purposefully goes above and beyond to give this very really gory imagery. He's gonna die until all of the skin and muscle has been torn off his body. It's very gory. So he kind of uses these sort of bodily nouns, the flesh, the bones, and this gory imagery. Um, Shows us that even in his death, he's persistent to using violence. And that's ironic because ultimately this will destroy him. Remember back in Act 3, we said he got into a cycle of violence. Well, he's still in it, clearly, because even though he knows he's going to die, he's not giving up. He's still fighting till the death. He's going to be violent until the end. He's not just going to give in. He's not just going to hand himself in. He's going to fight until all of his bones have been stripped out. You also sort of get the plosive consonants here, which adds to that. So the bones and the hacked. So even though he knows he's going to die, he doesn't step down and seek salvation. This emphasizes the moral message of the play, as Macbeth is a hyperbolic representation of the extremes of sin, leading to chaos to scare the audience into obedience. Macbeth represents what the audience sometimes wish they could be. It's like I was saying, everyone has these sort of desires that they want from life. Most people know to hold them in, whereas Macbeth didn't. He very much strove for ambition. He made sure to achieve ambition. And so the play is sort of a moral message telling the audience, don't do that. Actually hold your sins in. Because otherwise you're gonna just die in the end and the earth's gonna be corrupt. You also get this very blunt language as well. These very short words like I'll fight till from my bones. All of the sort of one syllable words, very much giving a fast pace to the line. So on the surface, this could appear as a warrior's cry. But read against the fact that we've just read against the previous lines, the weariness that he feels, the sadness that he feels. It's more like it's less like he's a warrior and more like he's got a refusal to surrender. It's the language of a man who prefers a bloody active death to humiliation, which is ironic because it's this mindset that ultimately kills him. And you also get the hyperbole, the exaggeration. Okay, so Act 5, Scene 4 then. Malcolm orders the soldiers to cut branches off a tree and use them as camouflage to reach Macbeth's castle. And I wanted to highlight this scene. This scene's really short, so there's not really much to go through for this scene, but I wanted to highlight just what happens. Because we know that in Act 4, Scene 1, the witches told him that he wasn't going to die unless the trees started to move. And so he felt false confidence. He was saying, well, trees don't move, so therefore I'm never going to die. He felt invincible. Whereas we know from dramatic irony that Malcolm orders the soldiers to cut branches off the trees as camouflage. So even though the trees don't literally move, it shows how deceptive the witches have been, that they kind of told half the truth. Because now the trees are moving. They've been taken and they're used as camouflage. So the one quote I kind of want to go through from this scene is just to represent that. Let every soldier hew him down and bow and bear it before him. Basically, Malcolm telling everyone to take to take a branch off the tree and camouflage themselves. So this shows that the witch's prophecies are coming true. And it's important because it's marking the beginning of Macbeth's downfall. This is the end for him. And it's important to note that this is the end. And so this is significant because this moment, this is the moment his false sense of security collapses. The witch's prophecies were ambiguous and deceptive. Now, Macbeth's overconfidence has led directly to his ruin. It also shows Malcolm's leadership and intelligence as the rightful king. Malcolm represents order. discipline, reason. As such, the wood is a symbol of nature's revenge. The natural order is being restored, reinforcing the idea of the great chain of being and divine right of kings. Malcolm is the rightful king. So by him using nature to camouflage himself, it's almost a symbolic of the fact that nature is fighting back, that the great chain of being is restoring itself. Okay. I'll just take some time to answer some questions. Is Macbeth always going to come up on a GCSE paper? If you've studied it, yes. Can I do some, show you how to write the paragraphs and what to include, like going through model answers? That could be a good idea, actually. If that is something that people want, if you want a session where after we finish Macbeth, we go through model answers, I'm happy to do that before we move on to Inspector Calls. If we just want one session just to clear everything up, how to write model answers, that sort of thing, that could be useful if that's what people want. Okay, so Act 5, Scene 5 then. This is the last one that we'll get to cover today. And then we'll finish off in the last 10, 15 minutes of next week. So, Act 5. Macbeth is informed of the death of his wife, Lady Macbeth. He reflects on the futility of life in his famous soliloquy, and then he learns that Birnam Wood appears to be moving towards Dunsinane, fulfilling the witch's prophecy. So, the sort of main point here is that he reflects. He takes this scene to reflect on how useless he has been as king. Now, I've not mentioned this word to you before, but I'm going to now. I've told you time and time again, as part of the context, as part of the AO3, 6 marks of your essay, he is a tragic hero. He's someone who fell from grace. He started really high, he started very likable, and then became someone who was evil and corrupt. Anagnorisis is a term related to that. All it means is it's a part of the play where the protagonist, in this case Macbeth, realizes how corrupt he's been. He realizes that he has to be defeated. And so I wanted to give you this term because Act 5, Scene 5 is this. It's the point in the play where Macbeth realizes that he's going to die. He realizes that every single thing that he's done up until this point has been useless. He's been violent for no reason. He's killed people for no reason. And so the sort of guilty version of him kind of rears its head again, like we saw in Act 2. He starts to feel human emotion again. So it's really nice. And a few quotes to show us this are things like, a woman cries off stage. And his response to this is, I've almost forgot the taste of fears. He hears a woman's cry and he feels emotion. It's like emotion that he hasn't felt for 2 acts have just suddenly come back into him. And he's feeling, he's touched by the woman's cry. So I wanted to highlight the stage direction, the representation, what it symbolizes. It makes him realize how cut off he has been from the world. He realizes the suffering he's caused to the people of Scotland by purely hearing this woman's cry. And his response to that is, I've almost forgot the taste of fears. What he's saying there is, I've almost forgotten what it feels like to feel fear. I've forgotten what it feels like to feel pain. And so you get sort of this natural pause here in the dialogue, this like pause before he responds to the cry, almost showing his hesitation. By slowing the pace here, by having him react to the woman's cry, it shows how much he's changed. It foreshadows the fact that he's gonna feel like everything is worthless. His language here is very desensitized. He's been emotionally numb for so long that he's forgotten what it feels like to feel fear. But now he is feeling fear again. The woman's cry helps him to become aware of his own loss of humanity. Earlier in the play, his conscience was very much alive. Think back to Act 2 when he said, "Oh, full of scorpions is my mind." But here, he shows how completely eroded his humanity has been. But for once, for the first time in two acts, he feels fear again. He feels human emotion. And so you get this kind of sensory metaphor where he reimagines fear as kind of a sort of taste, something that you can eat. As I meant something that can be eaten, suggesting that Macbeth once knew bitterness but no longer does. He craves it once more, like a flavor he took for granted. So the fact that you get the you get the metaphor of tasting fear. Now, in this scene, Lady Macbeth dies, and he gets told by his servant Seaton, and he says, "The Queen, my lord, is dead." And I wanted to highlight this because she died from guilt. We saw her sleepwalking. She died from being driven to a madness caused by shame. And so it shows contextually, at AO3 marks, the consequences of breaking the great chain of being. Order is being restored to Scotland, and the way that it's being restored is by killing Lady Macbeth and Macbeth. And so it almost foreshadows Macbeth's death in a few scenes' time. It tells the audience that this is what needs to happen for order to be restored. Okay. Now, his response to Lady Macbeth's death is this. Out, out, breathe candle. Life's but a walking shadow. A poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury. This is from a soliloquy that he gives, where he's reflecting on Lady Macbeth's death. Her death makes him feel hopeless. It makes him feel so bad about everything that he's done. Very much like the lady's cry, it's kind of a waking up call. It's a wake up call telling him, you've done all these terrible things, and he's realizing how bad of a person he's been. We get these lists of metaphors. He calls life a candle. He calls it a walking shadow, a poor player, a tale told by an idiot. He's calling life this list of metaphors. And each of them represents a different thing. Each of them represents how he feels about life. So the candle shows how he feels that his existence is fleeting. He realizes how easy it is that you can die and almost amount to nothing. The walking shadow symbolizes her lack of permanence. Shadows are visible but fleeting and meaningless. A bad actor symbolizing human pretension. Very much like him, he was overconfident. And so he's kind of referring to himself as a bad actor. He's saying, like a bad actor, I was overconfident and I didn't stop to think. And then a tale told by an idiot, conveying again this nihilism. No matter how dramatic or passionate life seems, it's ultimately meaningless. And so he's feeling like everything is meaningless. And you get this exclamatory apostrophe, the idea that he's talking into nothing. He's speaking to life as if it were a person, but it's not. Conveying his desperation and again, this feeling of meaningless. And again, the tone is very despairing. It's one of nihilism. It's one where he's lost all hope. He sees life as pointless. He's got a very cynical view of the world now, showing that he is morally and spiritually given up. But then if you were to pick a few more things out of this quote, you could pick out the semantic field of emptiness. The out, the brief, the person who's heard no more, the shadow, the idiot, all these things kind of are within a group of words relating to emptiness, really emphasizing how all of the actions that he's committed up until this point have led to no satisfaction, but purely despair. He recognizes how meaningless his violent acts were, like killing Duncan and killing Banquo. And you get this juxtaposition. It's a tale told by an idiot full of sound and fury. So you get this contrast between emptiness and chaos, really emphasizing and showing us how he's in this period of realization. He's becoming to acknowledge his own flaws, which is very much a contrast to his previous scenes. Shakespeare portrays a man disillusioned with power, recognizing that his violent rise has brought him nothing but isolation and despair. So this really is his anagyrisis, because he's beginning to realize how everything he's done has been so meaningless. He wanted to be king so bad that he killed people. But where's it got him? He's going to die. He knows he's going to die. And so he's feeling very worthless and very powerless. So linking to context then, again, I just want to reiterate this. He's a tragic hero, not an evil villain. He feels human emotion. And that's the key difference between a villain and a tragic hero, because he feels a human emotion. He realizes that all of his violent acts have been for nothing and that he is flawed. This is his anagyrisis. As such, the audience feel pity for him again as they realize that he is human. This highlights the theme of fate versus free will, as Shakespeare transverted the original Holinshed Chronicle story to make Macbeth more tyrannous much quicker. So this allows the play to be psychological in nature. It is deeper than just good versus evil or supernatural intervention. This is a play that would scare the audience by putting a mirror to them and showing them themselves in Macbeth. We all have sinful thoughts, but Macbeth acts on them. This play's message is not to transcend your place. Otherwise, the consequence is madness. Okay. So I just really want to just before we finish, I just want to just kind of stay on this for a little bit. Thinking back to the Holinshed Chronicles then. In the original story, so yeah, just the original story, Macbeth was quite a kind king for 10 years. But Shakespeare changes this and makes him evil much quicker. And by doing that, it makes the play psychological. And that's really the message of the entire play. Shakespeare did that to make the audience feel something. He wanted the audience to see themselves in Macbeth, to realize that Macbeth is human. Everyone has bad thoughts, everyone has desires. And Macbeth represents that. He represents the part of the audience that want to give in to desires. And so him having this turning point is almost holding a mirror up to the audience and saying, look, you are Macbeth. Macbeth followed his dreams, and it's led him to nothingness. It's led him to death. It's led him to this feeling that everything he's done has been pointless. And so it acts to kind of warn the audience to not do the same thing, because otherwise they will suffer the same fate. Okay, we'll stop there. We've got scene 7 and 8 to do, which we'll finish next week. I know I promised I would go on to Inspector Calls, but I didn't realize how big of a task Act 5 was until I started going through it. But it is important that we finish it. So, multiple people have said that they think a session going through model answers would be useful. I think next week, let's finish at scene 7, scene 8, and let's do a session on model answers. And then the week after, we can move on, absolutely, to Inspector Calls. And I'm going to do a session on the context of Inspector Calls, if that is okay with everyone. Otherwise, thank you for coming. If you take anything away from this, it's Macbeth is human and he is a tragic hero, not a villain. Okay, I'll take some questions then. Before, if anyone wants to stay around, I'll be here for the next few minutes to answer anything. What other books do you look at? So this is really dependent on your school. Most do Macbeth. You'll also then have a Victorian Gothic novel. So most people either do what's it called, Jekyll and Hyde or A Christmas Carol. Then you'll do a contemporary play, a sort of modern play. Most people do an Inspector Calls, so that's the one we'll cover next. And then you also do poetry. Thank you for your feedback on Macbeth. It's very helpful. I haven't received back question 5 story I wrote a few months ago. I remember marking that. I'm going to chase that up because I remember marking your story a few months ago, and I marked it when you sent it to me. I remember doing that. So if it hasn't been sent back to you, I'm not sure why, because I definitely sent it back to Mr. Siddiqui. because this was ages ago. Annoyingly though, if it was months ago, I don't have it anymore. I went through and deleted all the marking I'd done. So if that is the case, I'm happy to remark it because that's completely my fault. I've gone through and deleted it all, thinking that you had it. Cool. If there's no more questions, have a nice evening. Enjoy the rest of your week, whatever you do with it.